Zarath pressed herself against the cool metal wall of the observation deck, trying to make her large frame as small as possible. At nearly 8 feet tall, with broad shoulders and thick limbs, she stood out like a mountain among the delicate, willowy forms of her fellow Velthari. Her people prized elegance above all else: slender builds, graceful movements, and perfectly symmetrical features. Zarath possessed none of these qualities. The other young Velthari gathered around the central viewing portal, their melodic voices creating a symphony of excitement as they watched the approaching vessel. It was unlike anything they had seen before, blocky, practical, and utterly without the flowing curves that defined Velthari architecture. The ship's hull bore strange markings in an alien script. "Look how crude their construction is," laughed Kialara, the most popular of Zarath's generation. Her silver hair flowed like liquid metal, and her movements were so graceful they seemed choreographed. "No wonder they need such a bulky vessel. They probably lack the intelligence for proper engineering." The gathered Velthari tittered in agreement. Their society had achieved technological marvels through their pursuit of perfection: cities that floated on crystalline platforms, ships that moved like dancing leaves through space, and art that could literally steal one's breath away. These newcomers, these humans, seemed primitive by comparison. Zarath remained silent. She had learned long ago that her voice, deeper than the crystal-clear tones of her peers, only drew unwanted attention. Besides, something about the approaching ship intrigued her. While others saw crudeness, she noticed the ship's perfect functionality. Every line served a purpose. There was beauty in its efficiency, even if it didn't match Velthari standards. "I wonder what they look like," mused Telvin, another of the graceful ones. "Probably as ungainly as their ship. Can you imagine being so lacking in refinement that they would build something so utilitarian?" More laughter rippled through the group. Zarath felt her face burn with shame, knowing the words could just as easily describe her. Throughout her life, she had been the ungainly one, the utilitarian daughter who disappointed her artistic parents. Where other Velthari children learned to paint with light itself or compose symphonies that could heal emotional wounds, Zarath had shown aptitude only for mechanical things, understanding how systems worked, improving their efficiency, solving practical problems. Her parents, both renowned artists, had tried everything: private tutors in graceful movement, lessons in vocal harmony, even surgical consultation to see if her proportions could be corrected. Nothing had worked. Zarath remained stubbornly herself, large, practical, and utterly unable to create the ethereal beauty her people valued. The human ship settled into the docking bay with a series of mechanical sounds that would have made most Velthari wince. Their own ships landed in perfect silence, guided by harmonic resonance fields. But again, Zarath found herself oddly impressed by the human vessel's straightforward approach. It accomplished its goal without pretense or ceremony. Elder Moran glided into the observation chamber, his ancient form still maintaining the perfect proportions that marked true Velthari breeding. His presence commanded immediate attention, and the young ones arranged themselves in a pleasing pattern around him, all except Zarath, who remained in the shadows. "The human delegation has requested a cultural exchange," Elder Moran announced, his voice carrying the authority of centuries. "They wish to learn about our arts, our philosophy, our way of life. In return, they offer to share their technologies." He spoke the last word with barely concealed disdain. "Will they be staying long, Elder?" asked Kylara, her tone suggesting she hoped the answer was no. "A full cycle of the outer moon," Moran replied. "Long enough for a proper exchange, though I suspect we shall be the ones doing most of the teaching. These humans appear to be a young species, lacking in sophistication." As the elder departed, the young Velthari began planning how they would showcase their culture to the alien visitors. They spoke of dance performances that could bend light, musical compositions that would demonstrate their emotional depth, and sculpture that would prove their mastery over matter itself. Each tried to outdo the others in proposing increasingly elaborate displays of Velthari superiority. Zarath slipped away unnoticed. She had no talents to contribute to such exhibitions, nothing that would impress alien visitors or make her people proud. Instead, she found herself drawn to the lower levels of the city, where the maintenance systems hummed quietly in their hidden chambers. Here, among the practical machinery that kept their floating paradise functional, she felt less out of place. She was adjusting the harmonics of a water reclamation unit when she heard unfamiliar footsteps in the corridor. Heavy, purposeful steps unlike the flowing gait of her people. Peering around a corner, she saw her first human. He was shorter than she expected, maybe 6.5 feet tall, with a stocky build that reminded her uncomfortably of her own proportions. His clothing was simple and practical, dark fabric with visible pockets and fastenings. Most shocking of all, he seemed completely unbothered by his lack of Velthari grace. He walked with confidence, his eyes taking in everything around him with obvious curiosity and intelligence. Zarath tried to retreat deeper into the shadows, but her movement caught his attention. The human turned, and their eyes met. She braced herself for the look she knew so well, the mixture of surprise and disapproval that Velthari gave her when they first noticed her size and ungainliness. Instead, the human smiled. "Hello there," he said in accented but understandable Velthari. "I'm Commander Sarah Chen's engineer, Marcus Webb. I was hoping someone could show me how your environmental systems work. They're remarkably efficient from what I can see." Zarath blinked in surprise. "You want to see the systems?" "Absolutely. Your people have achieved incredible efficiency ratings. Our preliminary scans suggest you're using maybe 60% of the power we'd need for similar environmental control. That's fascinating from an engineering perspective." No one had ever called Zarath's interests fascinating before. She found herself stepping out of the shadows despite her usual caution. I could show you," she offered hesitantly. "I know these systems well." Marcus's smile widened. "That would be wonderful. I'm Marcus, by the way. And you are?" "Zarath," she replied, still not quite believing this was happening. "Pleased to meet you, Zarath. Lead the way." For the next several hours, Zarath found herself doing something she had never done before, sharing her knowledge with someone who genuinely wanted to learn. Marcus asked intelligent questions, made insightful observations, and seemed genuinely impressed by the elegant solutions the Velthari had developed for their technological challenges. "This is brilliant," he said as she explained how the atmospheric processors used crystalline matrices to separate and purify air. "We use brute force methods that consume 10 times the energy. Your people have found a way to work with natural harmonics instead of against them." "It's not really important," Zarath said automatically, the response trained into her by years of dismissal. "The others say it's just mechanical thinking, not true artistry." Marcus stopped examining the processor and looked at her directly. "Who told you that?" The question caught her off guard. "Everyone," she said simply. "Then everyone is wrong," Marcus replied with conviction that surprised her. "This isn't just mechanical thinking. This is engineering as art form. You're solving complex problems with elegant solutions that work in harmony with natural principles. That takes creativity, intelligence, and a deep understanding of how systems interact. Where I come from, we'd call someone with your abilities a master engineer." Zarath felt something stir inside her chest, a warmth she had never experienced before. For the first time in her life, someone saw value in what she could do. "Your people must create amazing things," she said wistfully. Marcus chuckled. "We try," But we're still learning. Most of our solutions are what you'd probably call crude, effective but inelegant. We could learn a lot from engineers like you." Before Zarath could respond, voices echoed down the corridor. She recognized Elder Moran's tone, along with several other authority figures. They sounded displeased. "The human delegation is supposed to remain in the upper chambers," Moran was saying. "They have no business in the maintenance areas." Marcus winced. "I think I'm in trouble. I asked permission to study your technology, but I guess I was supposed to stay in designated areas." Panic flared in Zarath's chest. If the elders found her here with the human, in the mechanical areas where she wasn't supposed to spend so much time, there would be consequences. For both of them. "This way," she whispered urgently, leading Marcus through a service passage that would bring them back to the upper levels without encountering the search party. They emerged near the main audience chamber just as Elder Moran and his companions appeared from another corridor. Marcus stepped forward smoothly, as if he had been heading to this location all along. "Elder Moran," he said with a respectful bow, "I was hoping to rejoin my delegation. I'm afraid I got a bit lost exploring your beautiful city." The elder's expression remained stern, but he seemed satisfied that the human was returning to proper areas. "The upper chambers contain everything you need to see," he said coldly. "There is nothing of interest in the lower levels." Zarath watched as Marcus was escorted away, feeling the familiar weight of isolation settle back over her. For a few precious hours, she had felt valued, even important. Now she was invisible again, dismissed back to the shadows where oversized outcasts belonged. But something had changed. Marcus's words echoed in her mind. Master engineer, brilliant, engineering as art form. Someone from another world had seen worth in her abilities when her own people could not. As she made her way back to her small quarters on the city's edge, Zarath found herself wondering about these humans. They were clearly different from her people, but perhaps that wasn't entirely a bad thing. If their engineer could see value in practical solutions and efficient systems, maybe there was more to them than the crude aliens her people assumed them to be. She fell asleep that night with Marcus's smile fresh in her memory, and for the first time in years, she didn't dream of trying to fit into spaces too small for her frame. Instead, she dreamed of systems and solutions, of problems waiting to be solved, and of someone who called her work brilliant. The human delegation's visit had only just begun, but already Zarath's world was changing in ways she never could have imagined. The next morning brought the first formal cultural exchange session. Zarath watched from a distant balcony as her people demonstrated their artistic mastery to the human delegation. Kilara performed a light dance that painted aurora across the chamber's crystalline walls. Telvin composed a melody that made flowers bloom from apparently solid stone. Elder Moran himself created a sculpture that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The humans observed politely, but Zarath noticed something her people missed. While they applauded at appropriate moments and asked respectful questions, their attention seemed divided. She could see them taking notes, but not about the artistic techniques being demonstrated. Instead, they were studying the underlying technology, how the light painting systems worked, what principles governed the matter transformation, how the dimensional sculpture maintained its impossible geometry. Commander Sarah Chen, the delegation's leader, was a woman of medium height with graying hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. She stood beside Marcus, occasionally leaning over to whisper questions that he answered with quick sketches in his electronic notebook. Zarath found herself wishing she could hear their conversation. After the demonstration, the humans were invited to share something from their own culture. Commander Chen stepped forward with a slight smile. "We're honored by your incredible artistry," she began. "We don't have anything that can match such beauty, but we'd like to share something that's important to us, a concept we call problem-solving innovation." She gestured to her team. and they began setting up what looked like a collection of simple materials: metal scraps, electronic components, and basic tools. To Velthari eyes, it appeared almost primitive. "We're going to demonstrate how humans approach a challenge," Chen continued. "We've been told that your atmospheric processors sometimes experience harmonic degradation during solar storms. We'd like to show you how we might address such a problem using our methods." Elder Moran's expression grew skeptical. "Such degradation is simply accepted. Our systems require perfect harmonic balance. When cosmic interference disrupts this balance, we shut down affected processors until conditions stabilize. It is the price of perfection." "What if it doesn't have to be?" asked Marcus, looking up from the materials he was arranging. "What if we could create a system that adapts to changing conditions instead of requiring perfect ones?" The Velthari exchanged glances. The concept seemed almost heretical. Their entire civilization was built on achieving and maintaining perfection. The idea of systems that functioned despite imperfect conditions challenged their fundamental worldview. Zareth found herself leaning forward, fascinated despite herself. She had always wondered about those shutdowns during solar storms. Her people accepted them as inevitable, but what if they weren't? Over the next 2 hours, the human team built something that looked nothing like Velthari technology. Where Velthari systems were crystalline and flowing, this device was angular and mechanical. Where Velthari technology achieved perfection through precise harmony, this creation seemed designed to handle chaos and change. "It's an adaptive harmonic buffer," Marcus explained as he made final adjustments. "Instead of requiring perfect conditions, it analyzes disruptions in real time and adjusts its own frequency to compensate. It's not as elegant as your systems, but it keeps working when conditions aren't ideal." The demonstration that followed amazed even the skeptical Velthari. The human device successfully maintained atmospheric processing functions while being subjected to artificial harmonic interference that would have shut down traditional Velthari systems within minutes. "Remarkable," admitted Elder Moran, though he sounded more troubled than impressed. "But surely such improvisation comes at the cost of efficiency?" Commander Chen smiled. "Actually, our preliminary calculations suggest it might be more efficient overall, since you wouldn't lose processing time during storms. But we'd need someone who really understands your systems to help us integrate the technologies properly." Her eyes swept the assembled Velthari, but found only puzzled or dismissive expressions. Most of them understood artistic principles, not engineering ones. They could appreciate the technical achievement, but lacked the background to bridge the gap between human and Velthari approaches. Zareth felt her heart racing. She understood both sides, the elegant perfection of Velthari systems and the practical adaptability of the human solution. She could see exactly how they might be combined, how human flexibility could be incorporated without sacrificing Velthari efficiency. But voicing such thoughts would mean revealing her presence, her interests, her fundamental difference from her people. The moment passed. Elder Moran declared the demonstration interesting but irrelevant, and the session ended with plans for more artistic exchanges the following day. The humans packed their equipment with expressions of polite disappointment. That evening, Zareth made a decision that would have seemed impossible just days earlier. She sought out the human delegation's quarters. The guards at the entrance looked surprised to see her. Few Velthari visited the guest chambers, and certainly none of Zareth's low social standing. But they had no orders to turn anyone away, so they allowed her to pass. She found Marcus in what appeared to be a workspace, surrounded by technical manuals and analysis equipment. He looked up as she entered, and his face lit up with genuine pleasure. "Zareth, I was hoping I'd see you again. What did you think of today's demonstration?" "It was brilliant," she said honestly, "but they didn't understand what you were trying to show them." Marcus nodded ruefully. "I got that impression. We were hoping to find common ground between our technologies. But most of your people seem more interested in artistic pursuits. What if? Zarath took a deep breath. What if someone did understand? What if someone could help you integrate the technologies? Marcus studied her face intently. Are you saying you could do that? I think so. I've been analyzing your harmonic buffer design, and I can see how it could be modified to work with our crystalline matrices. The efficiency gains would be substantial, and you could eliminate the processing downtime entirely. Show me. For the next several hours, Zarath found herself in territory she had never imagined. Treated as an expert, consulted as an equal, valued for her unique perspective. She and Marcus worked together, combining human adaptability with Velthari precision to create something neither species could have achieved alone. This is incredible, Marcus said as they completed their theoretical framework. You've managed to preserve the best aspects of both approaches while eliminating the weaknesses. Zarath, you're not just a good engineer, you're a visionary. The word hit her like a physical blow. Visionary. It was what her people called their greatest artists, the ones who saw beauty beyond conventional understanding. No one had ever applied such a term to her work. I'm just practical, she said, falling back on familiar self-deprecation. No, Marcus said firmly. Practical doesn't cover what you've done here. You've seen connections that neither humans nor Velthari recognized. You've found a way to make technology that's not just functional but truly elegant, beautiful in its simplicity and power. That's not practical thinking. That's genius. Their conversation was interrupted by angry voices in the corridor. Zarath recognized Elder Mor-An's tone, along with others she knew would not be pleased to find her here. Zarath! Elder Mor-An's voice carried sharp disapproval as he entered the workspace. What are you doing here? You have no business consorting with alien visitors. She was helping us understand your technology, Marcus said quickly, rising to face the elder. Her insights have been invaluable. Her insights? Mor-An's expression grew cold as his gaze shifted between Marcus and Zarath. What could she possibly offer? She has no training in proper arts, no understanding of true Velthari culture. She is a failed experiment, nothing more. Zarath felt the familiar shame beginning to crush her. But something had changed. Marcus's words, his respect for her abilities, had kindled something new inside her. For the first time in her life, she found the courage to speak back to an elder. I understand the atmospheric systems better than anyone, she said quietly but clearly. I know how they work, how to improve them, how to make them more efficient. That knowledge has value, even if it's not artistic. Elder Mor-An's face showed genuine shock. No one of Zarath's low status had ever contradicted him before. Value? He repeated, his voice dangerous. You speak of value while abandoning everything our people hold sacred? You consort with aliens who see beauty only in crude functionality, who would reduce our art to mere engineering. You are not just oversized, child. You are corrupted. The words struck deep, carrying the weight of a lifetime's accumulated shame. But before Zarath could retreat into familiar silence, Marcus stepped between her and the elder. With respect, he said, his voice carrying quiet authority, your people are wrong about her. Zarath has shown me innovations that could benefit both our species. She's found ways to improve your systems that your artists never considered because they were too focused on aesthetic perfection to see functional possibilities. What you call crude, we call adaptation. What you dismiss as mere engineering, we recognize as sophisticated problem-solving. Your people may not value her abilities, but we do. The challenge in his words was unmistakable. Elder Mor-An drew himself up to his full height, preparing to deliver the kind of withering response that had kept Zarath in her place for decades. Instead, alarms began sounding throughout the city. The distinctive harmonic pattern meant only one thing: a severe solar storm was approaching. Within minutes, all atmospheric processors would need to shut down to prevent harmonic degradation. The city would run on stored reserves until the storm passed, which could take days. Elder Moron's expression shifted from anger to concern. "The storm arrives early. We must begin shutdown procedures immediately." "Or," said Marcus quietly, "you could test our integrated solution. If it works, your people won't lose any processing time." "Impossible. The risk is too great." "What risk?" Zarath asked, surprised by her own boldness. "If the new system fails, you activate the shutdown procedures just like always. But if it works?" She didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone understood the implications. Days of reduced atmospheric quality, possible resource shortages, disruption of the delicate systems that kept their floating city operational. Elder Moron looked from Zarath to Marcus, his expression unreadable. The alarms continued their urgent wail, marking time until the storm's arrival. "Show me this solution," he said finally, "but understand, if it fails, both of you will bear the consequences." Marcus nodded grimly and began activating the equipment they had prepared. Zarath moved to the city's system controls, her hands steady despite the magnitude of what they were attempting. As the first waves of solar interference began disrupting the delicate harmonic balance that kept their city functioning, she initiated the integration protocol she and Marcus had developed. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the displays began showing something no Velthari had ever seen: atmospheric processors continuing to function normally despite the chaotic energy washing over them from space. The storm that should have forced a citywide shutdown barely registered on their systems. Elder Moron stared at the displays in stunned silence. Around them, other Velthari began to gather, drawn by the impossible sight of their technology continuing to function under conditions that should have shut it down completely. "How?" whispered Kailara, her perfect features marked by confusion. Zarath looked at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. For the first time in her life, she had something to teach that others desperately wanted to learn. "It's about adaptation instead of perfection," she began, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Instead of requiring ideal conditions, the system learns to function despite interference. It's still elegant, still beautiful, but it's also practical." As she explained the principles behind their breakthrough, Zarath realized that everything was changing. The technology they had created would revolutionize how her people approached engineering challenges. But more than that, she was finally able to show her worth to a society that had always seen her as a failure. The oversized outcast had found her power, and it was about to change everything. Word of the successful storm weathering spread through the floating city like ripples on water. Within hours, Zarath found herself surrounded by Velthari she had never spoken to before. Engineers, technicians, and even some artists who had never paid attention to the mechanical systems that enabled their perfect world. "You must teach us this adaptive principle," demanded Chief Engineer Yelhan, a respected figure who had previously dismissed Zarath as incompetent. "If we can apply it to other systems, we could eliminate dozens of inefficiencies." Zarath looked to Marcus, who gave her an encouraging nod. "It's not just one principle," she explained, finding confidence in her voice she had never known existed. "It's a whole different way of thinking about problems. Instead of designing for perfect conditions, you design for the real world, with all its chaos and unpredictability." The crowd of gathered Velthari exchanged uncertain glances. The concept still felt foreign to people raised on the pursuit of perfection, but the evidence was impossible to ignore. Their city had just survived a solar storm without any system failures, something that had never happened in their recorded history. Elder Moran stepped through the crowd, his expression thoughtful rather than disapproving. "Zarath," he said formally, "the council wishes to speak with you, and with Engineer Webb if he is willing." Marcus bowed respectfully. "Of course, Elder." The council chamber was a marvel of Velthari architecture. Crystalline walls that shifted color with the occupants' moods, acoustics designed to carry even whispers clearly, and seating arranged in perfect geometric harmony. Zarath had never been inside before. Citizens of her low status were not typically invited to address the council. The 12 elders sat in their traditional formation with Elder Moran at the center. Their faces showed various degrees of curiosity, skepticism, and reluctant respect. Elder Sil-Ara, the oldest among them, spoke first. "Zarath of the engineering caste," she began, using a formal designation that surprised everyone present. Zarath had never been officially recognized as having a caste at all. She was simply an outcast. "Your collaboration with the human delegation has produced unexpected results." "Yes, Elder," Zarath replied carefully. "We must understand what has transpired. Our atmospheric systems have operated on the same principles for over 1,000 years. They are the foundation of our civilization, tested and perfected across generations. Yet in a matter of days, you have changed them fundamentally." "How?" Zarath glanced at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. She took a deep breath and began to explain not just the technical modifications they had made, but the philosophy behind them. She spoke of human concepts like iterative improvement, fault tolerance, and adaptive design. She described how beauty could exist in functionality, how elegance could be found in resilience rather than just perfection. As she spoke, something remarkable happened. The elders began to listen, not with the polite attention they showed to standard presentations, but with the intense focus they usually reserved for matters of critical importance. Some leaned forward in their seats. Others took notes. Elder Moran's expression shifted from skeptical to thoughtful to what might even have been impressed. "These human concepts," said Elder Kolseth, "they suggest that imperfection has value. This challenges our most fundamental beliefs." Commander Chen, who had remained silent until now, requested permission to speak. "With respect, elders, we don't see it as celebrating imperfection. We see it as acknowledging reality. The universe is chaotic, unpredictable, and constantly changing. Designing systems that can only function under perfect conditions is limiting. Yet our pursuit of perfection has given us unparalleled achievements," argued Elder Velmar. "Our art moves souls. Our cities float on air itself. Our music can heal wounded hearts. Would you have us abandon all of this for mere utility?" "Not abandon," Marcus interjected. "Expand. Zarath has shown that you can have both, systems that are beautiful and functional, elegant and practical, perfect in their adaptability rather than their rigidity." The debate that followed lasted for hours. Zarath found herself at the center of discussions that would reshape her civilization's future. More importantly, she discovered that her voice carried weight. When she spoke, others listened. When she offered solutions, they were taken seriously. For the first time in her life, she was truly seen. The breakthrough came when Elder Sil-Ara asked a simple question. "If we were to implement these adaptive principles more broadly, what would we need?" "Teachers," Zarath replied without hesitation. "People who understand both approaches, traditional Velthari precision and human adaptability. People who can bridge the gap between artistic beauty and practical function." "And where would we find such teachers?" Zarath looked directly at the elder, no longer afraid to meet those ancient eyes. "You already have one, and the humans have offered to help train others." The silence that followed was profound. Everyone in the chamber understood the implications. Zarath, The oversized outcast, who had been dismissed as a failure, was proposing to become an instructor for her own people. Elder Moran broke the silence. "You would accept such a role, to teach our engineers these hybrid techniques?" "I would be honored," Zarath replied, and meant it completely. The formal decision took 3 more days of deliberation, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The evidence was too strong, the benefits too obvious. The council authorized the establishment of a new division within their engineering caste, the Adaptive Systems Institute, with Zarath as its founding director. The announcement sent shockwaves through Velthari society. The outcast, who had been mocked for her size and practicality, was now being elevated to a position of unprecedented authority. Some accepted it with grace, recognizing her obvious competence. Others struggled with the implications, unsure how to reconcile their lifelong beliefs about perfection and beauty with this new paradigm. Kailara was among the most vocal critics. "It's wrong," she declared to anyone who would listen. "We're abandoning everything that makes us Velthari. Soon, we'll be just as crude and mechanical as these humans." But her protests fell on increasingly deaf ears. Too many people had seen the results of Zarath's work, and more innovations were emerging daily. Environmental systems that adapted to changing conditions, transportation networks that rerouted around problems instead of shutting down, even artistic installations that evolved and grew over time instead of remaining static. The real transformation became clear during the humans' final week on the station. Commander Chen requested one last cultural exchange, but this time, she asked Zarath to represent the Velthari perspective. Standing before the assembled delegation, Zarath felt the weight of history. A few weeks earlier, she had been hiding in maintenance tunnels, avoiding social contact out of shame. Now she was speaking as an official representative of her people. "When you first arrived," she began, "my people saw only differences between us. You seemed crude where we were elegant, practical where we were artistic, chaotic where we were orderly. But we missed the most important similarity. We're both species that refuse to accept limitations." She gestured to the displays showing the new systems they had developed together. "You taught us that perfection isn't about eliminating all flaws. It's about creating something so well designed that it can handle whatever the universe throws at it. We taught you that functionality can be beautiful, that solving problems elegantly is its own art form." Marcus smiled proudly from the audience. "And what did we create together?" "Something neither species could have achieved alone," Zarath replied. "Systems that are both beautiful and practical, elegant and resilient. We found perfection not in rigidity, but in adaptability." The applause that followed came from both species. As the formal ceremonies concluded and the humans prepared for departure, Marcus approached Zarath one final time. "I have something for you," he said, handing her a small device. "It's a communication array, long-range, adaptive frequency, designed using principles we developed together. We'd like to stay in touch, compare notes, share innovations, maybe collaborate on future projects." Zarath accepted the device with hands that trembled slightly. "You want to keep working with me?" "Zarath, you're one of the most brilliant engineers I've ever met. Human, Velthari, or otherwise. Of course we want to keep working with you." As the human ship departed, Zarath watched from the observation deck, where this had all begun, but she was no longer pressed against the wall, trying to hide from view. She stood confidently at the central viewing portal, surrounded by colleagues and students who had come to learn from her expertise. Kailara approached hesitantly, her perfect features marked by uncertainty. "Zarath, I wanted to apologize for the things I said, the ways I treated you." "We all believed what we were taught," Zarath replied without bitterness. "That perfection meant one specific thing, that value only existed in certain forms, but the humans showed us something different. What did they show us? Zareth smiled, remembering Marcus's first words of praise, his recognition of abilities her own people had dismissed. They showed us that true perfection isn't about eliminating differences. It's about finding the beauty and value in unexpected places. They looked at me and saw not a failed Velthari, but a master engineer. Not someone who was broken, but someone who was perfectly suited for challenges no one else had thought to address. As the human ship disappeared into the stellar distance, Zareth felt the profound satisfaction of knowing she had found her place in the universe. Not the place others had tried to force her into, but the one that fitted her perfectly. The oversized outcast had discovered her power not by changing who she was, but by finding people who recognized the value in who she had always been. And in the process, she had helped 2 entire civilizations discover new definitions of perfection, ones that included adaptation, resilience, and the courage to see beauty in unexpected forms. The humans had recognized her power, but more than that, they had taught her to recognize it herself. And now, as director of the Adaptive Systems Institute and teacher to a new generation of Velthari engineers, she would spend her life helping others make the same discovery. Sometimes, the greatest revolution begins not with changing the world, but with one person finally seeing themselves clearly for the first time.